Truistery Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot. Today, Truistery Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Seren Caldera had mastered the art of quiet survival. At 29, she was the kind of woman who spoke more with her eyes than with her voice, who carried entire days on her back without ever asking for help. Every morning, she woke at 5:30, not because she wanted to, but because her life required it. Breakfast for her daughter, Neva. A quick shower before the water heater gave out. Packing lunches. Checking on the aging washing machine. And always making sure not to wake Jex. Jex Rowan was still asleep. He usually was. Her husband of 6 years had made lethargy an identity. Seren had stopped asking questions a long time ago. There were only so many times you could plead with someone to care about their life before it felt like begging. Jex had dreams once, a podcast, a vintage clothing resale shop, even a stint at community theater. Now, he had his Xbox, his energy drinks, and an endless rotation of YouTube rants. They used to love each other. Or maybe they just used to try. The little townhouse in Belmont, a sleepy town tucked between piney hills and the foggy Pacific coast, creaked when Seren walked across the kitchen floor. The kettle hissed. Neva's soft footsteps approached. At 4 years old, she had already developed the habit of whispering in the mornings, sensing the volatility in their home like a tiny weather vane. "Mommy," she whispered, tugging on Seren's sleeve, "can I have the sparkly cup today?" Seren smiled, kissed the top of her daughter's curly head, and handed her the glittery pink tumbler. "Only if you promise to drink all your juice." She packed her work bag, kissed Neva goodbye, and left her in the care of Maeve, her mother-in-law, who lived just 3 blocks away. Maeve and Seren had an unspoken agreement, politeness in exchange for peace. But lately, even Maeve had started to look at Jex with a furrowed brow. Seren worked at Indigo Nest Studio, a local handcrafted goods company that specialized in eco-friendly decor. It was the kind of job that demanded calloused hands and a gentle heart. Seren had both. She sanded wood with care, wove textures with precision, and designed with an eye that felt emotion rather than trend. Her supervisor, Dahlia, often praised her for her consistency and quiet leadership. Yet, no one knew the whole story. No one knew how Seren would go home to a man who hadn't left the couch all day. How she'd find crumbs on the coffee table, laundry unfolded, and dinner unmade. How she'd be met with complaints about the Wi-Fi speed or why the fridge didn't have the kind of juice he liked. And somehow, Jex always managed to spin it into her failure. "If you didn't work so much, maybe this place wouldn't feel like a goddamn waiting room," he said one night as she scrubbed dishes in the kitchen. She didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. That night, Seren lay in bed next to Jex, listening to the rhythmic click of his controller and the synthetic explosions of whatever game he was playing. Her eyes burned from exhaustion. Her back ached from standing all day, and still, her mind ran laps. She thought about the version of herself she used to be. The girl who once painted murals in college hallways, who danced barefoot in art studios, who believed in the magic of creating something out of nothing. That girl hadn't vanished. She had just been shelved. The next morning began the same. Coffee. Neva. Avoiding Jex. And yet, something was different. Maeve met her at the door, arms folded, lips pursed. "We need to talk," she said. Seren blinked. "Is Neva okay?" "She's fine. It's you I'm worried about." They sat at Maeve's tiny kitchen table, next to a half-dead potted fern and a bowl of instant oatmeal. The older woman sighed. "I didn't raise my son to be like this," Maeve began. "And I sure as hell didn't expect you to carry him." Seren was silent. "You think staying quiet is strength," Maeve continued. "But silence isn't noble if it lets someone else get comfortable in their worst habits." The words stung. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Later that week at work, Dahlia pulled Seren aside. We're sending someone to Portland next month. Design training.
Paid.
I think it should be you. Seren almost dropped the ceramic tile in her hand. Me?
You.
You're steady, thoughtful, ready.
It's just a week.
Think about it. The idea felt outrageous. A week away? From Neva? From Jex? From everything? But also, a week for herself. That night, she brought it up to Jex. Dahlia wants to send me to Portland.
Just for a week.
Design training. Jex snorted. So, you get to go on a little vacation while I stay here and play Mr. Mom? Seren set her fork down slowly. It's not a vacation. It's work. And Neva could stay with your mom. Oh, so you've already planned this, huh? No, I haven't. I mustn't. He leaned back, arms crossed. You really think you're better than this life now, don't you? The words weren't shouted. They were whispered, but Seren felt them like a slap. That night, while Jex snored, Seren sat in the hallway, phone in hand, staring at a blank message screen. She wanted to type, I can't do this anymore. But instead, she wrote, I'll go. I accept the trip. And for the first time in years, she slept soundly. Across town, the Pacific wind rustled through pine trees. In that quiet corner of Belmont, Seren Caldera made a decision not with fireworks, but with silence. A decision that would change everything. She would go to Portland, not to escape, but to begin. Seren had never packed a suitcase for herself before. Not for pleasure, not for work, and certainly not without checking with someone else first. But now, as she stood beside her modest wardrobe, folding one pair of jeans and 2 work shirts into a soft-sided bag, she realized that this simple act of choosing what to bring felt like rebellion. Portland was only 2 hours away from Belmont by bus, but it might as well have been another continent. Dahlia had smiled warmly when Seren accepted the trip, handing her an envelope with hotel details and a printed itinerary from the design conference. It's your week, she'd said. Let it change you. The morning of her departure, the fog hung low over the trees. Seren kissed Neva goodbye at Maeve's porch, her daughter already content with a coloring book and a sippy cup in hand. I'll call every night, Seren promised. Maeve nodded. Don't feel guilty about this, Seren. You're not abandoning her. You're teaching her how to become strong. Seren smiled, blinking back tears. Then she walked away, without looking back. The conference center in downtown Portland smelled like espresso, paper, and a hint of lavender-scented sanitizer. It buzzed with creative energy. People with piercings and portfolios. Bold patterns and sharp opinions. Seren felt underdressed, overwhelmed, and somehow excited. Workshops filled the days. Color theory, sustainable materials, market trends. Seren took notes obsessively, sat in the front row, asked quiet questions that earned her nods from instructors. It felt like waking up from a long sleep. On the 3rd afternoon, during a workshop about narrative textiles, she noticed a familiar figure 2 rows down. Broad shoulders, wavy dark hair, a voice that, even after 10 years, she could still remember from long nights in college dorm lounges. Thane? As if sensing her gaze, he turned and froze. Seren. She laughed, awkwardly. Didn't think I'd ever see you here. He blinked, then smiled slowly. You look the same, but different. You too, she said, self-conscious under his gaze. After the session, they walked out into the courtyard, paper cups of tea in hand. The air smelled of damp brick and distant rain. I thought you moved to New York, she said. I did. Then Berlin. Then back to the States. I'm working with a creative agency now. They sent me here to scout artisan collaborations. Of course they did, she said, smiling. You always had the energy of someone who is going somewhere. He raised an eyebrow. And you always had the look of someone who is meant to build something lasting. The compliment sat awkwardly in her chest, warm, dangerous. They talked for an hour. About the industry. About past professors. About how they had lost touch. I thought of reaching out, he admitted. I even drafted a message once. But then I figured life had moved on. Maybe too far. Seren hesitated. It had. But maybe not entirely. That evening, back in her small hotel room, Seren lay on the bed staring at the ceiling fan, letting its slow turns match the rhythm of her breath. She hadn't told Thane about Jex, about the couch, the controller, the stale air of resignation. She had simply said, "I have a daughter." He had smiled, not flinched. How old?
4.
Her name's Neva. Beautiful name. She remembered how that moment had felt, a man hearing she had a child and not using it as a reason to retreat. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jex. Neva threw a fit at bedtime. Probably because you're off pretending to be a designer. She didn't reply. The next day, Thane invited her to coffee after the final seminar. They walked through Powell's books, browsed through the design section, paused in front of a display of handmade journals. "You used to keep sketchbooks," he said. "I still remember that one with the blue leather spine." "I still have it," she replied. "Somewhere at the bottom of a box in my closet." "You should fill a new one," he said. She looked at the notebooks, their covers whispering possibilities. "Maybe," she said. Over coffee, he asked about her life. Not just the logistics, but the heart of it. "Are you happy?" he asked gently. Seren paused. "No," she said finally. "But I'm surviving." He nodded, not pressing. Sometimes surviving is the bravest kind of living. She looked down, tears threatening. "I used to think I was strong for enduring. But lately, I wonder if I've just been disappearing." "You're not invisible," he said. "I see you." Something inside her cracked open. That night, she called Neva. Her daughter's sleepy voice full of excitement about a coloring contest Maeve had organized. "I miss you, Mommy. I miss you more, sweetheart. Only 2 more nights, okay?" "Okay. Did you get my drawing?" Seren smiled.
"Yes.
"I taped it on the mirror so I can see it every morning." Neva giggled. "You better not forget me." "Impossible," Seren said. She hung up and sat quietly for a while. Then she opened her laptop and began typing, a list of things she missed about herself. "I used to laugh easily. I used to love turquoise. I used to paint without knowing what the painting would become. I used to believe in the possibility of more." The list grew, and with it, a slow fire in her chest. The final day of the conference came too quickly. Thane found her after the closing keynote. "I'm leaving tomorrow," he said. "Back to Seattle. Want to grab dinner?" She hesitated. "I'm not available." "Not yet," she said carefully. "I know," he said.
"This isn't about that."
"I just want to talk." One friend to another. They ate at a quiet bistro tucked in an alleyway, surrounded by hanging plants and soft jazz. Conversation flowed easily. At one point, he told a story about almost getting locked inside a textile factory in Prague, and she laughed so hard she had to put her fork down. "You always had that laugh," he said. "Like wind chimes."
"Real."
Unapologetic. She looked away, flushed. "I forgot how good it felt to be seen,"
she said.
"You never stopped being worthy of it," he replied. After dinner, he walked her back to her hotel. At the door, he paused. "You don't have to explain anything. Just don't forget that you matter. That you're more than someone else's shadow." Seren nodded, unable to speak. "Take care of yourself," he added. "You too," she whispered. He walked away without looking back. And she let him. The morning she left Portland, the rain came in soft waves. Seren boarded the bus with her bag, a new sketchbook, and a note from Dahlia that read, "You are always more than capable. I'm proud of you." On the ride back to Velmont, Seren watched the trees blur by. Her phone buzzed, another message from Jex. "Don't forget to pick up groceries on the way home. We're out of coffee." She turned off her phone. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of the silence. She welcomed it, because now she knew the door wasn't just slightly open. She was ready to walk through it. The bus ride back to Velmont was quieter than Seren expected. The trees outside the window blurred into watercolor shades of green and gray. The Portland skyline had faded behind her. and in its place was the looming weight of what she had to return to. She stepped off with her tote bag and suitcase, the chill of the mountain town cutting through her coat. Rain kissed the pavement. The station was nearly empty, just a clerk behind the window and a sleepy teenager waiting for a ride. Seren pulled out her phone. 3 missed calls from Jex. No voicemail. 1 text. "We're out of coffee. Grab some on the way back." That was it. "No, how is it?" "No, I missed you." "Not even is Neva okay?" Maeve picked up the phone on the first ring. "She's just finishing her lunch," Maeve said warmly. "She's been such a little helper. You'd be proud." "I already am," Seren said, her throat tightening. "Come straight here. It's pouring and Neva wants to show you her new crayon mural." Seren laughed. "I'm on my way." 15 minutes later, she stood under the porch of Maeve's weather-worn cottage, suitcase in one hand, heart pounding in the other. Neva ran to her like a comet, arms outstretched, curls bouncing. "Mommy, I drew a rainbow on the wall, but Grandma said it's abstract art." Maeve rolled her eyes fondly from behind. "We're being generous with the definition." Seren scooped her daughter into her arms, hugging her tightly. "I missed you so much." "I missed you more," Neva whispered, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. Inside, the house smelled like soup and lavender. Seren sipped chamomile while Neva proudly explained her drawing: a purple sun, 3 blue stick people, and a yellow dog that looked suspiciously like a pineapple. Maeve leaned against the sink. "Did the trip go well?" Seren nodded slowly. "Better than I expected. Worse than I expected. Everything at once." Maeve studied her for a long beat. "You came back different. I feel different." The words hung in the air, warm and uncertain. As rain tapped against the window panes, Seren felt something close to peace. She almost wanted to stay there forever. But she couldn't avoid home forever. She promised Neva they'd go back after dinner. It happened the next morning. She was running late. Neva's backpack had gone missing, and Jex had again slept through his alarm. Though he had nowhere to be, Seren rushed out the door on her bike, skipping breakfast. She didn't mind the drizzle. But she didn't see the car. The driver had been turning out of a blind alley. It wasn't fast, but fast enough to knock her off her bike, tumbling onto the wet concrete. There was no dramatic impact, no blood spray, but her arm ached and her head throbbed. Her breath came short and shallow. She sat up slowly, dazed. The driver jumped out. "Oh my God, are you okay?" Seren blinked, rain stinging her eyes. I think I need help." Someone called 911. Another bystander helped her sit against a storefront while the ambulance was en route. Her vision blurred. Her heart pounded. Not with fear, but with the thought of who to call. She called Jex. It rang.
And rang.
And went to voicemail. The paramedics arrived minutes later. They checked her vitals, helped her onto a stretcher, and asked who they could contact. "My husband," she mumbled, holding her throbbing arm. "Jex Rowan." They dialed the number. No answer.
Maeve then.
She picked up in 2 rings. "I'll meet her at the hospital," she said. "Tell her I'm on my way." At the ER, Seren sat in a curtained cubicle, her arm in a sling, head wrapped in a gauze pad. She had a mild concussion, a hairline fracture in her wrist, and a lot of bruises. Maeve showed up with a cardigan, a bottle of water, and eyes blazing with quiet fury. "Where is he?" she asked softly. Seren looked down. Didn't come. Didn't answer. Maeve didn't say anything. She didn't have to. By the time they left the hospital, dusk had fallen. The rain had stopped, but the wind had picked up. Seren sat in the passenger seat of Maeve's car, watching the dark trees blur past. At home, Jex was on the couch, Xbox controller in hand. A bag of chips lay open beside him. He didn't even look up when they walked in. "Took you long enough,"
he muttered.
Seren stared at him. Her face was pale, her clothes still slightly damp. Maeve stepped forward, her voice low and sharp. "Your wife was in an accident. She could have been seriously injured." Jex paused his game. "She's obviously fine. She's standing right there. Seren didn't say a word. She walked past him into the bathroom, closed the door, and locked it. She didn't cry. She just sat on the edge of the tub and breathed. 2 days later, she found the letter. A plain white envelope slipped under the front door. Her name printed in all caps. Inside, a notice of overdue payments. Credit card debt. In her name. She hadn't opened that account. She hadn't spent that money. But the purchases were familiar: electronics, in-game currency, streaming services. All the things Jex wasted hours with. She stared at the amount. Over $17,000. And her name was on every page. That evening, after Neva fell asleep, Seren stood in the hallway, the letter trembling in her hand. "You opened a card in my name," she said. Jex didn't look up from his phone. "You weren't using your credit anyway. You lied to me. You forged my signature." He rolled his eyes. "Relax. I was gonna pay it off." "With what? You haven't worked in 8 months. I've been applying. You haven't left the house in a week." His tone sharpened. "Maybe if you weren't such a damn martyr all the time, I'd have room to breathe." Seren stood still. "I got hit by a car," she whispered. "You didn't show up. You didn't even answer the phone." Jex scoffed. "You're fine now. Stop trying to turn it into a sob story." Something broke in her. Quietly. Cleanly. "I'm leaving you," she said. He laughed, harsh, ugly. "No, you're not. I already have." She walked into the bedroom, closed the door behind her, and began to pack. Seren didn't take much. Just clothes for her and Neva, her sketchbook, and the photo of Neva's first birthday party that Maeve had framed. She left the rest. Jex shouted behind the door. Kicked it once. Twice. Then, he went silent. When she walked out with her bag, he was sitting on the couch again, the controller in his lap, staring blankly at the menu screen. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "I already did," she replied. Maeve opened the front door before Seren could knock. "Come in," she said simply. That night, Seren slept on Maeve's pull-out sofa, Neva curled in her arms. She didn't sleep much, but it was the first time in years she felt like she could breathe. The next day, she called a lawyer. It was time. 2 weeks passed. Seren filed the papers. She received no response from Jex. Until one evening, he showed up at Maeve's door. Furious. Red-eyed. Loud. "You want to take my kid? My house? My stuff?" "You haven't touched Neva's backpack in months," Seren said calmly. "You think some little trip to Portland makes you better than me?" "No," she said. "It reminded me I'm not less than you." Maeve stood behind her, phone in hand. "You need to leave. Now." Jex punched the mailbox on his way out. The next morning, Seren found her divorce papers torn into shreds on her old front porch. She filed again, this time directly with the courthouse. She wouldn't ask twice. A few days later, Seren came home to find Maeve sitting on the couch with a stiff expression. "I need to tell you something." Seren sat. "Jex, he's in debt. More than what you saw. He's borrowed from neighbors. Even tried to pawn Neva's old toys. Said they were vintage." Seren's stomach turned. "Why would he?" "He's been gambling. Online. Through apps." I overheard him yelling on the phone. For a moment, Seren couldn't speak. Then quietly, "I can't let him near her anymore." "You won't have to." Seren found a small apartment above an old bookstore on Chestnut Street. It wasn't much, just a bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and a creaky floor, but it had a window with morning light and a lock Jex didn't have a key to. The first night there, Neva helped her arrange throw pillows into a fort. "Is this our new castle, Mommy?" she asked. Seren kissed her forehead. "It's whatever we want it to be." That weekend, she hung fairy lights along the bedroom wall and put up Neva's abstract rainbow drawing in the kitchen. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, life began to shift. One night, after a long day at work, Seren came home to a message from the courthouse. Jex had responded to the filing, begrudgingly, with a note. "Fine, I'll sign. But you get nothing. No house. No money. No furniture. Just take the kid and go." She stared at the letter for a long time. And then she smiled. That's exactly what she wanted. The custody hearing was brief. Jex didn't show up. The judge awarded Seren full custody. Jex had waived his rights with silence. Maeve hugged her outside the courthouse steps. You did it. I didn't do it alone. They drove to the beach that afternoon. Seren let Neva run barefoot in the surf while she sketched in her book. She drew waves, and a woman standing in the middle of them.
Still. Tall.
Unbroken. A few days later, as Seren walked Neva home from daycare, she saw a familiar figure across the street.
Thane.
He was leaning against his car, coat collar turned up, smile soft. Didn't expect to see you here, she said. I was passing through. Thought I'd take a chance. Neva peeked from behind her. Who's that, Mommy? Seren paused. An old friend. Thane crouched. Hi there.
I'm Thane.
Neva narrowed her eyes, curious but not afraid. Do you draw pictures too? I try, he said. Seren laughed. He didn't ask to come in. He didn't push. But before he left, he handed her a small, wrapped sketchbook. I thought you might need a fresh one. She held it close to her chest. Thank you. As he walked away, Neva whispered, He smells like cookies. Seren laughed until her eyes watered. That night, Seren tucked Neva into bed and lingered at the doorway longer than usual. Her daughter's small chest rose and fell in the soft rhythm of dreams. The fairy lights twinkled above the bed, casting a warm glow across the walls. Seren sat at the kitchen table with a new sketchbook Thane had given her. For a long time, she didn't open it. She just rested her hand on the cover, breathing in its possibility. Then she opened the first page. She didn't draw a face or a place. She drew a line, a single, bold, curved line, looping forward. Like a road, like a future. She closed the book and whispered, We're going to be okay. A week passed. Then two. Jex texted once, asking for a chance to explain. She didn't answer. Then came the message from his mother. Jex was moving away. A girl he had been seeing was pregnant. He planned to start over. He wouldn't be fighting for custody. He asked Maeve to tell Seren that he wished her well. Seren didn't feel relief or rage. She just felt done. On a bright Saturday morning, Seren and Neva moved the last of their things into the apartment. The bookstore owner downstairs brought up a plate of fresh muffins as a welcome gift. Neva handed her a crayon drawing as thanks. Later that evening, they watched the sunset from the fire escape. Neva leaned against her mother. Can this be our forever home? Seren wrapped an arm around her. It can be whatever we want it to be. She didn't think of Jex anymore. Not the way she used to. Not with anger or longing. He was a chapter she'd finally closed. This was her blank page. And she intended to fill it. The first morning in their new apartment. She stood in the kitchenette, sipping coffee from a chipped mug.
No yelling. No tensión. No regrets.
Just the start of something new. Seren didn't have much. Her job at the local craft shop wasn't enough, even with her promotion to assistant display manager. The hours were inconsistent, the pay low. And although she threw herself into merchandising holiday displays, the bills kept piling up. That night, after Neva fell asleep clutching her favorite plush dinosaur, Seren sat at the tiny table and opened her laptop. She typed out an email to the publisher she'd connected with at the design conference, sharing a link to her portfolio. Her heart raced with hope and fear in equal measure. The next morning, she pedaled her used bike to work, the spring air crisp with possibility. By the end of the day, she had sold 5 of her framed prints at a weekend market outside the coffee shop. 5 wasn't much, but it was a start. Weeks passed in a blur of freelance gigs and late nights. Seren sold 10 more prints. Then 20. One of her illustrations, a line drawing of a woman holding a storm cloud over her head, was reshared by a popular mental health page. Overnight, her follower count tripled. A week later, a publisher messaged her. Would you consider illustrating a children's book? Seren stared at the message for 10 whole minutes. She read it once, then twice. Her fingers trembled as she typed back.
Yes.
I'd love to talk. But not everything was smooth. Neva caught the flu the same week Seren had 2 deadlines. She worked through the night, taking short naps with her head on the dining table. One afternoon, she got a call from school. Neva had thrown up during story time. Seren raced there, heart pounding, and arrived to find her daughter pale and shaky but brave. "I threw up on my boots," Neva said solemnly. "But I didn't cry." Seren smiled, tears in her eyes. "That's okay. Mommy cried a little today." Neva leaned into her. "You can cry if you want." Seren carried her home wrapped in a blanket, whispering thank you to every god, angel, and random force of nature for letting her be there. Not at a meeting. Not in the hospital. Not somewhere else. Here, with her child. As Seren's art career slowly budded, Velmont began to feel different. Less like the cage it had been with Jex, more like a landscape she could reclaim. She joined a local co-working space. At first, she only used their Wi-Fi. Then she started chatting with other creatives. She taught a watercolor session one rainy Saturday. When it ended, an older woman with silver hair pulled her aside. "You have a presence," she said. "People feel safe learning from you." Seren didn't know what to say. No one had ever said something like that to her. Not in school. Not in marriage. She walked home in the drizzle. Soaked but glowing. Thane texted her sometimes. Light check-ins. A link to a good article about digital sales. A photo of a storefront mural he saw in Seattle that reminded him of her Cloud series. They hadn't seen each other since that day on the sidewalk. She thought about him more often than she admitted, to herself, to Maeve, to the mirror. But she wasn't ready for anything new. Not yet. One night he texted, "Proud of you." That post today hit home. She didn't respond, but she smiled for a long time. One afternoon in late spring, Seren received an envelope in the mail with her name printed in soft gold lettering. Inside was a formal invitation to a local art exhibit, the Velmont Rising Artists Showcase. Her piece, Woman with the Storm, had been selected. Neva clapped when she heard. "Does that mean you're famous now?" "Not famous," Seren laughed, "but maybe seen." The night of the exhibit, Maeve stayed with Neva while Seren dressed in the only black dress she owned and took a deep breath before stepping into the gallery. The room was glowing with fairy lights, soft jazz floating through the air, and walls lined with canvases and sketches from artists across the county. Her piece was displayed front and center. People stood in front of it, talking in low tones, pointing, nodding. One woman was crying. Seren stood in the back, stunned. Then a voice beside her said, "You made her feel something." She turned. Thane. He wasn't wearing anything fancy, just a deep blue button-up and clean jeans. But he looked at her like the room was full of static, and she was the only calm in it. "Your work deserves to be here," he said. She smiled. "Thank you for pushing me, even from far away." They didn't touch. They didn't even linger. But as the night went on, Thane stayed nearby, weaving in and out of conversations, always within reach. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew what it felt like. Steady, warm, possible. By summer, Seren's illustration work had turned into a real income. She wasn't rich, far from it, but she could pay rent without calculating down to the dollar. She bought a second-hand bike, replaced Neva's torn sneakers, started a small savings account. Most importantly, she woke up every day with purpose. Even when she was tired. Even when she doubted herself. Especially then. She built a morning ritual, coffee, 10 minutes of quiet drawing, breakfast with Neva. On weekends, they went to the farmer's market and picked one strange fruit to try. Dragon fruit. Persimmon. Star apple. Neva renamed them all. "This one's a rainbow crunch," she said proudly. Seren wrote it down. Fall brought a few new challenges. Her biggest freelance client dropped their project due to funding. Neva got chickenpox and had to miss school for 2 weeks. Seren fell behind on commissions, lost sleep, and spent more than she earned that month. One night, exhausted and overwhelmed, she sat on the floor of their living room and cried silently into her knees. Then a small hand touched her shoulder.
Neva.
in pajamas, holding her plush dinosaur. "You can cry if you want," she said, repeating Seren's own words from months ago. Seren scooped her into her lap and held her like a lifeline. "I'm just tired," she whispered. "Then sleep. I'll guard you," Neva said. And Seren did. A week later, she received an email from a boutique publishing house. They wanted to collaborate on a series of children's books, not just one. They loved her style. They believed in her voice. They offered a real contract, with royalties. Seren reread the email under a blanket, holding Neva in one arm, her phone in the other. She didn't scream. She didn't run to tell anyone. She just smiled. For once, she didn't feel like the universe was testing her. It was rewarding her. One chilly morning, as leaves blew across the sidewalk, Seren stepped into the coffee shop by the park and saw Thane at the back, working on his laptop. She hadn't planned to see him, but she walked over anyway. He looked up and smiled. That same calm smile. That quiet offer. She sat down. "Hey," he said. "Hey." They didn't talk about the past. They didn't rush into the future. They just talked. Laughed. Shared a muffin. When he walked her back to her bike, he said, "Can I see you again?" She didn't hesitate. Yes. That night, Seren tucked Neva into bed, turned off the light, and sat in the quiet living room. Sketchbook open. She drew a woman standing in a forest. Alone, but not lost. The trees around her weren't closing in. They were opening. She wrote beneath it, "Some beginnings look a lot like endings." Then she put down the pencil, leaned back, and whispered, "We're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long time, she didn't just believe it. She knew. The autumn evening breeze slipped through the cracked window, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. Seren Caldera sat at her kitchen table, head resting on her hand, staring at the steaming mug of cinnamon tea Thane had brought earlier. It had been 3 weeks since he offered to take her out to dinner, and she was still trying to decide. She heard a soft knock and turned. There he stood, in the dim hallway light, hands in his pockets, eyes hopeful. "Mind if I come in?" he asked, voice low and casual. She stood, smoothing her sweater. Yes, come in." He nodded and stepped inside. The apartment felt warm, lived in, fairy lights strung over the window, children's drawings taped to the fridge. Her latest watercolor propped on the counter. "It looks lovely," he said, taking in the scene. "Thank you," she murmured. Silence settled. Thane cleared his throat. "Listen, Seren. I wanted to tell you something." His hands unfolded, revealing a small, folded card. She recognized the pale gold script on the front, her name, handwritten. Her heart fluttered. She poured him a cup of tea as he spoke, his voice steady but earnest. "I've been thinking about us," he began. "About you, about Neva. About everything you've gone through. I know you're not looking for rescuing. I don't have a cape, and I can't fix the past. But I want you to know that I care about you, both of you. In every moment I get to spend with you, I feel more alive. I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Seren's throat tightened. She looked down at the card. The inside revealed a simple watercolor of a storm cloud parted by sunlight, with the words, "Every storm I see, I want to share the sky with you." Her fingers trembled. She swallowed. Thane was here, offering himself with honesty and respect, not demands. It felt alien. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything right now," he replied softly. "I just wanted you to know how I feel." He folded the card and slipped it into his coat pocket. No pressure. Just honesty. She nodded, looking at him with gratitude and fear. The space between them felt charged. She wanted to close that space, to reach out, to let him in. But a lifetime of doubts held her back. They stood in quiet companionship, the city hum outside. Seren sipped her tea. Thane watched her with gentle patience. After a long moment, Seren placed her empty mug in the sink. "Thank you for telling me." Her voice was steady. "I need time to think. I have walls I didn't know were that high." He smiled, relief mixing with tenderness. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." He left, and Seren closed the door slowly. She leaned against it, sliding down until she sat on the floor, tears blurring her vision. Walls. She'd built them to protect herself, but now she wanted to tear them down. The next morning, Seren found Maeve on the porch, sipping coffee. She looked at her, as though studying a painting she didn't fully understand. Maeve. Seren began. Maeve set her mug down. I heard from Thane. Shall we sit? They moved to the old rocking chairs. The autumn sky was pale. How do you know him so well? Seren asked. How do you trust my happiness? Maeve smiled softly. Because I see you braver than I've ever known. After everything you've been through, after the silence and the storms, you've found your voice again. Thane, he listens to you. He watches you. That's rare. That's valuable. Seren's eyes filled. I'm scared. Of course you are, Maeve said. She took Seren's hand. Love scares all of us. But the alternative, closing off your heart, keeps you frozen. You deserve warmth, Seren. You taught my granddaughter to be brave. Now, it's your turn to be brave for yourself. Seren nodded, drawing strength from her former mother-in-law's words. She spent the day in quiet reflection, revisiting old letters in her journal, strolling the park paths with Neva, watching the leaves fall like amber rain. She read Thane's card again, tracing the watercolor edges. That evening, she texted him, Coffee tomorrow? I'd like that. Thane replied with a smiley and a time. On the day they met, the cafe was nearly empty. He greeted her with that same calm smile. She had dressed warmly in a burgundy scarf, her hair braided on one side.
And he noticed.
You look beautiful, he said softly. Seren's cheeks warmed. Thank you. They ordered lattes and sat by the window. Seren took a steadying breath. I want to try, she said. Try us. But at my pace. Thane reached across the table, covering her hand. Always at your pace. She exhaled, hope blooming. I'm scared I'll break under pressure. You won't, he said. I'll be gentle. Their eyes met. Seren felt the cracks in her walls widen just enough for light to pour in. And she welcomed it. Over the next few mornings, Seren woke before dawn, not to scramble for coffee and sketches, but to savor quiet moments. She pulled on her coat, bundled Neva into her snowsuit, and led her by the hand to the old oak in the park where they buried a tiny time capsule of first drawings and notes. Thane brought his camera, capturing Neva's laughter as snowflakes landed on her pink mittens. Afterwards, they gathered around a bench, sipping hot chocolate. Seren closed her eyes, warming her face. This was her chosen life, a tapestry of bravery, creativity, and love. She opened her eyes to see Thane's gaze on her, filled with promise. He mouthed, I love you, silently, and she returned a shy smile, knowing one day she would say those words back with certainty. One evening, Seren invited Maeve and Thane to a small celebration at Indigo Nest Studio, her first solo gallery show. The studio glowed with lanterns, and Seren's illustrations lined the walls. Parents brought children. Artists shared stories. And Seren hosted with a genuine smile that reflected the journey she had taken. She introduced Thane as her partner, and Maeve beamed with pride. As midnight approached, the crowd thinned. Seren and Thane stood outside under a string of lights. She slipped her hand into his, leaning into him. Thank you for helping me open my heart, she said softly. Thane brushed a stray hair from her face. Thank you for letting me in. Seren's heart swelled as the year closed. From a silent life defined by survival to this moment of sharing joy and love, she had reclaimed herself. Her heart was open, vulnerable, and strong at once. That winter night, Seren wrote in her journal, Today I choose hope. I choose you. I choose love. With the turning of seasons, her heart continued to grow, rooted in courage and nourished by kindness. For Seren Caldera, life had begun again, truly, beautifully begun. The morning of her wedding arrived not with fanfare, but with quiet sunlight slipping through the curtains. Seren Caldera woke before dawn. heart fluttering in a way she hadn't felt in years, uneasy excitement mixed with peaceful certainty. She tiptoed through the apartment, careful not to wake Neva, who lay curled beneath her pink duvet, clutching her beloved dinosaur plush. Thane's message had come just hours ago. "I'll be at the chapel at 8. If you're ready." Seren pressed her palm to her stomach, remembering how far she'd come. From the silent apartment she once fled, to this moment of promise. She dressed slowly in her simple ivory gown, threads of lace tracing her arms like gentle reminders. Below, Maeve brewed coffee and arranged lilies in a vase. "You look radiant," she whispered, eyes bright with tears. Seren smiled. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Maeve pressed a hand to her cheek. "You gave me a granddaughter and a daughter-in-law I admire." They shared a quiet laugh before packing the last of Neva's things. At breakfast, Neva sipped hot chocolate with marshmallows and insisted on wearing her best dress, a mint green frock festooned with daisies. She twirled on the living room rug like a miniature princess. "Mommy, I can't wait to be your flower girl," she said. "I can't wait either," Seren replied, wiping a stray tear. By 7:30, they were in Thane's old sedan, nose to tail along the winding road to the cliffside chapel. Velmont's coastline glittered beneath them, waves crashing like applause. Seren breathed in the salt air, tasting freedom. Thane drove with quiet concentration. His hand brushed hers on the gear shift. Seren squeezed back. A wordless vow. Together. They arrived at the small white chapel, its steeple dipping toward the sea. Guests stood on the lawn, Dahlia from Indigo Nest, waving. The bookstore owner with his family, neighbors, and a handful of friends from the art community. All drawn by Seren's journey. Inside, wooden pews faced floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Pacific horizon. Seren paused at the threshold, heart pounding. Thane appeared beside her, buttoning his jacket. "You look perfect," he said softly. She blinked back tears.
No.
"You do." He kissed her forehead. "Ready when you are." The ceremony began with Maeve leading Neva down the aisle, scattering petals. Seren stepped forward with her father's old jacket draped over her arm. Her real father had passed, but she wore his love in every stitch. Music swelled, a soft violin rendition of "Here Comes the Sun." Thane turned, eyes shining. Seren felt herself glow. They walked together, the world blurring to a tunnel of light. The officiant, an old friend of Maeve's, wise and warm, spoke words of commitment, laced with poetry of storms and sunshine, of resilience and rebirth. Seren and Thane exchanged vows. "Seren, I vow to stand with you when skies are gray, to share laughter when clouds part, and to love you, brave and gentle, every day."
Thane.
"I vow to hold your hand through every storm, to guard your heart with respect, and to choose you, every sunrise, every sunset, for all my days." They placed rings on each other's fingers, simple bands, symbols of new beginnings. The officiant pronounced them married. Thane picked Seren up in a joyful swoop, spinning her before setting her down in a tender embrace. Guests cheered as confetti of dried petals drifted like snowfall. After the ceremony, they stepped onto the lawn for family photos. Neva perched on Thane's shoulders, giggling. Maeve pressed a plate of sandwiches into Seren's hands. Seren laughed, truly laughed, as she held her new family together. As the sun dipped low, Seren slipped away with Thane to the cliff's edge. The wind whipped her hair. The ocean roared beneath. He turned her to face him. "You're my greatest adventure," he said, brushing a kiss across her lips. She closed her eyes. "And you're mine." They watched dusk settle, the sky painting itself in hues of lavender and gold. Seren rested her head on Thane's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. She reached up to touch his face, marveling at the journey it had taken to arrive here. Dinner was a casual affair under a canopy of string lights. Long wooden tables were laden with comfort food, roasted vegetables, fresh bread, apple cider. Guests shared stories of Seren's art, Maeve's dancing days, and Thane's quiet generosity. Dahlia raised her glass. To Seren and Thane, may your hearts remain open, your storms rare, and your love ever bold. Everyone cheered. Seren found herself smiling so wide her cheeks ached. This was love. Messy, imperfect, radiant. As plates were cleared, Neva grabbed Seren's hand. "Mommy, can we dance?" Music shifted to a slow waltz. Seren lifted Neva into a twirl. Then Thane joined, spinning Seren between them. The three danced beneath the lanterns, a small constellation of family. Maeve watched with tears shining. She mouthed, "She's happy." Thane caught Seren's eye and nodded. They were building something real. When the party ended, Seren and Thane walked the beach, barefoot in the sand. The moon's reflection stretched across the water. Seren leaned into him. Tonight felt like a dream. He smiled. "It's our reality." She lifted her dress hem, letting waves lap her ankles. "I never thought I'd feel so free." "Because you were always meant to fly," he said, voice hushed. She faced him, eyes alight. "Thank you for teaching me to open my heart again." He took her hands. "You taught me what it means to hope." They kissed beneath the moon, the world hushed but for the surf. Morning after dawned quiet and golden. Seren awoke wrapped in Thane's arms. She watched him sleep, strong jaw, peaceful expression. She felt gratitude spill through her like light. Neva bounded in, laughing. "Mommy, Uncle Thane. Let's go find seashells." Thane lifted Neva onto his shoulders. Seren joined hands with both of them. They walked into the surf, feet sinking into wet sand. She watched her daughter's bright eyes, her husband's gentle grin. She thought of the long road, the neglect, the accident, the divorce, the rebuilding, the slow bloom of love. And she realized every step had brought her here, to this new world, where storms were met together, where hearts were open, where laughter and tears wove into a life she chose. Later that day, Seren sat at her art table, sketching a fresh watercolor, a family against the sunset, silhouettes glowing. She signed it below, "The Day She Smiled." She hung it above the mantel next to her wedding invitation and Neva's rainbow drawing. It was more than art. It was testament. A life reclaimed, a heart reborn, a future unwritten but bright. The sun had not yet fully risen when Seren stepped onto the porch with Thane. The dawn sky was a soft wash of pink and gold, and the world felt hushed in reverence of their first morning as a family. Neva remained asleep inside, exhausted from last night's celebration. Seren wrapped an arm around Thane's waist, resting her head against his shoulder. "Did you sleep at all?" he whispered. She exhaled, a shaky laugh escaping. 10 minutes at most." Thane kissed her temple. "Worth every second." They stood in comfortable silence, listening to distant gulls and the whisper of waves on the cliff below. Seren closed her eyes, letting the warmth of Thane's body ground her. For so long, she'd moved through life half-conscious, bearing weight that wasn't hers to hold. Now, she felt light, as if she could take flight at any moment. Inside, Neva woke to the aroma of pancakes and cinnamon. Seren flipped a batch on the griddle while Thane set the table. The kitchen was cluttered with wedding mementos, pressed petals, their vows written in calligraphy, the invitation bearing Seren's new last name. Neva bounded in, eyes wide. "Is today the day we go find shells?" Seren laughed, turning a pancake. "Yes, sweetheart. And we might find a few surprises." After breakfast, they packed a picnic, fresh berries, cheese, bread, and Thane's thermos of hot chocolate. Seren tucked her sketch pad into her tote, just in case. They three piled into Thane's truck and headed to their favorite cove, a hidden beach strewn with tide pools and colorful stones. At the cove, Neva ran ahead, giggling as she chased crabs retreating under rocks. Seren and Thane walked hand in hand, their footprints trailing behind. Seren stopped to collect a shell that glowed pale pink, pressing it to her ear to hear the ocean's echo. Thane knelt beside her, producing a second shell of mottled gold. He handed it to her. "For you." She looked at him, stunned. Why this one? He smiled. Because it's unique, like you. And every time you listen, you'll remember this moment. They shared a soft kiss beneath gulls wheeling overhead. Seren felt tear-bright in her eyes, tears not of sorrow, but of overwhelming gratitude. They spread their picnic on a flat rock warmed by the morning sun. Neva perched between them, squealing with delight as they handed her pieces of bread. After eating, Thane retrieved a camera and snapped photos of Seren and Neva, capturing the spontaneous joy on their faces. Seren drew in her sketchpad, sketching Thane's profile against the sea, sunlight dancing off his hair. In another corner, she drew Neva chasing waves. With each stroke, she chronicled her new life, one of moments both grand and intimate. As afternoon ripened, they explored tide pools. Seren knelt to examine a cluster of sea anemones, their tentacles waving like graceful dancers. Neva tapped the water gently, enthralled by the creature's delicate movements. Thane guided them both, his quiet confidence providing a sense of wonder and safety. Later, perched on a driftwood log, Seren rested her head on Thane's shoulder. This is happiness, she said.
Pure. Simple.
He kissed her forehead. And it's just the beginning. They watched the tide ebb, revealing hidden pools full of life. Seren marveled at the resilience of creatures adapted to constant change, much like herself. Returning home, they found Maeve waiting on the porch, arms crossed in playful sternness. You two look too happy, she chided. Get inside and let me fuss over you. They laughed and followed her in. Seren put Neva to bed, tucking her in with extra kisses. She lingered at the doorway, watching her daughter breathe in sleep's peaceful rhythm. After Seren closed Neva's door, Maeve guided her to the living room where Thane waited with a blanket on his arm. Movie night, he asked. Movie night, Seren confirmed. They settled on the couch under the blanket, a classic black and white film flickering on the screen. Seren felt Thane's arm around her, Maeve halfway dozing in the next chair. The world was exactly as it should be. Love, family, warmth. The following week, Seren's publisher delivered the first bound proofs of her children's book starring Neva's adventures. Seren and Thane spread the pages across their kitchen table, flipping through vibrant illustrations of courage, friendship, and dawning self-belief. I can't believe it's real, Seren breathed. Thane squeezed her hand. Because you made it real. She ran a fingertip across the cover. Neva and the Garden of Stars. Seren reflected that her journey paralleled her daughter's story, both learning to plant seeds of hope in uncertain ground, and to trust that life would bloom. Days later, as winter's first snow dusted Belmont's hills, Seren hosted a reading at Indigo Nest Studio. A circle of children sat cross-legged on a wool rug, faces alight with curiosity, as Seren read aloud. Neva sat on Thane's lap, whispering excitedly. Maeve sat beside them, tears glistening. Thane captured the moment on his phone. Seren animated with passion, Neva mesmerized, Maeve glowing. When the reading ended, applause rippled through the room. Strangers approached, praising Seren's warmth and creativity. Seren felt her heart overflow. Afterward, outside the studio, Thane wrapped Seren in his arms. You've changed the world for these children, he said softly. Seren nodded. She imagined every listener carrying the story into their hearts, just as she carried Thane's love. One evening, Seren found herself alone in the apartment, Thane away on a short trip for work. Neva asleep next door. She walked the halls quietly, pausing by her wedding dress displayed under soft light in the guest room closet. Her reflection shimmered in the gown's lace. She closed her eyes. Memories of her old life, of pain, silence, fear, rose and drifted away like old leaves. She had chosen to open her heart again, and the world had responded with a chorus of blessings. At that moment, Thane stepped into the doorway, suitcase in hand. I couldn't wait to get home, he said, smiling. Seren moved to him, her heart swelling. I missed you. He set down his bag and drew her close. I missed you more. They stood in the golden hallway, embraced by memory and promise. Christmas arrived. The apartment was filled with evergreen, twinkling lights and warmth. Seren and Neva baked cookies. Thane roasted chestnuts in the oven. Maeve joined them, humming carols. By the fireplace, Seren placed the final ornament, a miniature storm cloud topped with a tiny gold sun, at the center of the tree. "This one's special," she told Neva. "It's hope after rain," Neva said, echoing Seren's own mantra. Seren kissed her daughter's crown. Exactly. They stood back to admire their creation, a family tree rooted in love and resilience. On New Year's Eve, they invited friends to celebrate. The living room filled with laughter. Seren danced with Neva in her arms. Thane joined, spinning Seren between them. Maeve watched, pride shining in her eyes. Midnight approached. They gathered on the balcony, sparklers in hand, overlooking the city lights. Thane raised his sparkler. "To us," he said. Seren joined him. "To love." Maeve chimed in. "To family." As the clock struck 12, fireworks burst overhead. Seren felt the explosion of color mirrored in her chest. Joy, relief, hope. She turned to Thane. He held her close, their faces lit by fireworks. Without words, they shared a vow. In every storm and calm, they would stand together. Seren closed her eyes, lips brushing his. And at that moment, the day she truly, fully smiled, she knew she had found her forever. Epilogue. Months melted into seasons. Seren's book became a beloved favorite. Thane and Seren built a home near the cove where they'd first danced under the moon. Neva grew into a writer in training, capturing family adventures in her own little notebooks. One spring morning, Seren sat at her desk, pen in hand, beginning a new story. A tale of a woman who overcame silence, discovered love, and learned to smile again. She titled it simply, "The Day She Chose to Open Her Heart." She paused to watch Neva and Thane in the garden below, digging soil, planting wildflowers. Seren's heart glowed with gratitude. She had learned that life's true magic lay in courage, the courage to leave the past behind, to start from scratch, to trust again, and ultimately, to let her heart open wide. And so, under a sky that had once felt like a heavy burden, Seren Caldera embraced each dawn, each laugh, each tear, with an open heart and an unbreakable smile. And that brings us to the end of today's story on Truestry Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.